If you click on this video, one thing I can say for sure. You want to improve your damage. Either because you're struggling with the end game, you just want to get better scores, and sometimes even watching guides feels like it's not enough for you because one video is going to say, oh, you should use penetration. The other one's going to say, hey, you should use damage, and you have no idea which one is the right option for you. But don't worry, I got you. Because in this video, I'm going to be helping you understand what happens between the click of your mouse all the way to the damage on your screen. So you can go from this damage to this damage. Before talking about damage, the very first thing that you need to understand is about how stat works, because there are three different kinds of stats. We have the base stat, we have the initial stat, and we have the combat or final stat. For the sake of clarity, I'll be talking about attack, but it works pretty much the same way for HP, defense, impact, energy regeneration, a lot of stuff, okay? You're going to understand. So let's start with the base stat. What is base stat? The base stat is the base attack of the agent plus the base attack of the weapon. And you can check like the base stat in case you don't want to, you know, remove everything from your character. You can check the base stat, base attack, or whatever it is, just by clicking here on this thing, */anomaly, you click it, and it's going to open this detailed stats thing. 1250 is the base attack of Grace. And why base attack is important? Base attack is important because you see this here, main stat, attack 30%, attack 6%, hormone punk 2-piece effect, which increases your attack. All of these things, they happen on top of your base attack. This is the base attack. This is the initial buffs. Let's call it like initial buffs. When you sum these two together, you get your initial attack. That's how it works. Simple as this. You can check if something is like initial buff or not, if they are applied right here on your stat page. For example, 2-piece hormone punk. This disc, for example, it has no attack numbers, but the moment that we remove, the attack goes down. That's because 2-piece effects, they are initial buffs. Main stats, substats, all these things, they work on top of your base attack. Okay, same thing for the secondary stat of all weapons. Depending on the rarity of the weapon, you can get like a higher base attack. You see, for example, this is Fusion Compiler, but if I take a look on the Electrode Gloss, an A-rank weapon, you can see that the base attack is lower. I change this, you're going to notice that the attack goes down. Both the base attack lowered and also the initial buffs lowered, because with a lower base attack, it means the attack increase also lowers down. Same thing if I swap for a limited engine, such as Burnies, for example. It's a limited engine. Limited engines have higher base attack. And Miyabi as a Void Hunter, it has even higher base attack. As you can see, I can swap this one. And you're going to notice that increases both sides here, both the base attack and all the initial buffs as well. And why initial attack is so important? Because we have buffs like Sokaku, for example, that scales with her initial attack, not attack. You know, this means that if we increase Sokaku's attack inside of the combat, it's not going to matter at all, because she's only going to scale with this number right here. Same thing for Astra as well. It works exactly the same. She only scales with this number. As you can see, Astra, Yao, initial attack. Okay, so just Vivian, for example. You see, every 10 points of anomaly proficiency. There's no initial anomaly proficiency or anything like this. It's just anomaly proficiency. We have Burnies for every 10 anomaly proficiency after burn damage increases by 1%. So no initial mention, it means that it scales with combat stats. If it says initial attack, it means it's only going to scale with your initial stat, the number that appears right here. Okay, that's all we need to keep in mind. And then we have something that is called combat stats. Combat stats is anything that can only be activated when you are in combat, such as, for example, Grace Fusion Compiler. You see, we have this increases attack by 12%. However, this increases attack is not active right here. Only way for the game to acknowledge this is if you are inside of the combat. Same thing happens, for example, with Hormone Punk 4-piece effect. It says, upon entering combat or switching in, its user attack increases by 25%. The only way for the game to know if this is happening or not is inside the combat. So this is what we call combat buffs. And these, instead of using your base attack, they use your initial attack. And that's why even though sometimes you're stacking a lot of attack, you know, on your discs, then you get inside of the combat and you get a good combat buff, you can get like a lot of attack. Let me just pause the screen, stop typing from moving, and then you take a look on detailed stat is exactly like, you know, the detailed stat page on your character screen. So here we have base attack plus initial buffs equals to your initial stat. Initial stat plus combat buffs means your final attack. It works exactly like this with every single stat. Skills, as you can see right here, they are going to give you base attack. If you take a look, for example, on a stunner unit, you can see that it increases the base impact. Okay, that's how it works. Base stats, initial stats, and then combat stats. There are 3 different stats, okay? With that out of the way, we can finally dive into the damage stuff. And damage stuff is like super easy. We have like the final attack right here, you know? And then we have the damage multiplier on our skills. You can see that every single hit has different multiplier values, okay? Every single time that you see someone saying a skill MV, MV stands for multiplier value. You can see that there are some that has a higher multiplier value. If you take a look, for example, on Ultimate, you're going to see that it has an even higher number, and the list goes on, right? So basically what happens, you get your final attack, multiplied by the skill multiplier value, and there you go. You get your damage on the screen. And it's not like this, okay? It's not exactly, this is not the only thing that is happening, and there's actually a lot of stuff happening from the moment that you decide to attack the enemy all the way to the moment that the damage pops up on your screen. This attack and the skill multiplier value is only the first step. We have plenty of other multipliers happening right here, such as defense multiplier, damage multiplier, stun multiplier, and a lot of other stuff. Okay, I'll be going through everything in this video so you can properly understand how things works, you know, without the number, without the formula stuff. Okay, the idea here is to make things really, really easy to understand. So let's start once again with the attack. This is the first thing that the game is going to look for. And then it's going to multiply by this thing that we call skill MV. And these two together, they make up what we call the base damage. This base damage is going through all the multipliers that I said before becoming this number right here. However, there's still something that can happen right here. And this something so far means Hugo. I know that some people still can't fully understand what Hugo is doing to your damage, how he can achieve this much damage. Can it deal critical damage? I don't know. Yes, it can. What Hugo is basically doing is, if you take a look here at core F, it can increase the skill damage multiplier by a maximum of 3,400, okay? 3,400, that's how much Hugo can increase. So let's say, for example, we have a skill, you know, the ultimate, let's say it has a 4,000 MV. And then Hugo says, no, you need to add 3,400 MV, right? So what we get right now is a 7,400 MV, which is going to multiply with the attack. You see, that's what Hugo is doing with your damage. After this here, it is still going to work with all other multipliers that I said before, okay? The only thing Hugo is doing is messing up with this skill MV. That's what Hugo is doing with your damage. This base damage then goes all the way through all of possible multipliers, okay? Just so you know, the order of the factors doesn't alter the product, so yes, it happens on any order, it doesn't matter. The only thing that you need to know is that we have a bunch of multipliers. And the easiest one for you to understand is, of course, critical damage. Easy stuff, right? Either you deal a critical hit, and when you don't hit a critical, well, you just avoid this. Goodbye, no critical damage. It's simple as this, okay? On Theorycraft, we usually do something that is called average critical multiplier. We just take the crit rate and we multiply with the crit damage, you know? So it's something like this. So yeah, if you deal a critical hit, it's going to multiply by your critical damage. And then the next one, right after this, let's talk about a really classic one. I love talking about this one because it's so confusing for a lot of players. I'm talking about damage multiplier. This is a classic one that a lot of players have no idea actually how it works, and sometimes ended up losing a lot of damage potential because they are saturating damage multiplier. And what do you mean with saturation? Okay, hear me out. Let's explain how it works first, okay? What exactly is damage? It's all source of damage. All source of damage that you can imagine, it means damage. Everything, it's just damage. Take a look on Billy, for example. Physical damage disc 5, and then it's using 2-piece Fanged Metal, physical damage plus 10%. Okay, cool. Then we have Billy at core F. You get 50% if you use the skills during the crouching stance. Then let's assume that Billy is using an ultimate, okay? Ultimate with 2 stacks, this means a total of 100% increased ultimate damage, right? And then let's say that we are also using, you know, Astra with the 4-piece Astral Voice. And also Astra herself, you can get another 20% damage. So now let's take a quick look here on all the damage that Billy is stacking on when using his ultimate, okay? Okay, so this is all the damage that you're stacking on your Billy by using ultimate with 2 stacks of your additional ability, using on the crouching stance, you know, so core F plus 50%. Physical damage disc 5, Fanged Metal 2-piece Astra with max skill, that's 20% damage, 24% of Astral Voice 4-piece on your Billy. There you go, you have a total 234% damage. And the thing here is that let's suppose you are removing disc 5, okay? No more disc 5. How much final damage you think you're losing by removing disc 5? You're probably thinking something like, oh, I'm losing 30% final damage, right? I'm removing disc 5, which is 30% physical damage. It is not. It's actually way lower than this. You know, so instead of 334% damage multiplier, you're now sitting at 304% damage multiplier. And the difference between these two is only 10%. It's not 30% anymore. And now you must be thinking, okay, but that's still damage, right? I'm still dealing extra damage, right? And you're right. What I'm trying to make you understand is how saturation works. Because you can stack a lot of damage right here without a problem. You could also start working with other multipliers here, you know. And the point here is that you have 300% damage. But your other multipliers are like base level, just 1. At the end of this, you still get a 3 here. But then, if you balance your stuff out and you get 2 and 2, you get a 4. So you see, by avoiding saturation and trying to understand multipliers and balancing your stuff through every single one multiplier, you can achieve better damage potential, okay? Avoid saturating stuff. Think of it like this, okay? Let's imagine 2 different cups here. And then we have another one right here. Don't mind the size, that's not the point. I suck at drawing, I'm sorry. So yeah, we have one glass here full of water, okay? And then let's drop a single drop of water here and a single drop of water here, okay? You can barely notice the extra drop of water here, but the moment that you drop a single drop here, it's easy to notice that something changed here. But here, not so much. Okay, so that's what you need to keep in mind. If you already have a lot of something, avoid putting even more on top of it, because you're not going to notice the difference that much. Not saying that you should stop using damage, it always going to depend. Sometimes even if you're at super saturated on the damage, it is still going to be like the best option between all of the other stuff. Hopefully you can understand damage, and since I know it was like a lot of stuff, I'm going to give you some extra time to digest everything by going over some really simple multipliers. And the next one, which is like super simple stuff, is stun damage. And can I be honest, I don't like the fact that they call it like stun damage multiplier, because it feels that the two here are related one to the other, you know, but they are not. They are not related one to the other. I personally would rather just call stun multiplier. It makes things so easier to understand and avoid confusion. But yeah, the game calls stun damage multiplier. You can find it, for example, Qingyi. Qingyi is the classic example of stun damage multiplier because she can go all the way to 80% damage multiplier. It's a lot of stuff. 80% is a lot of extra stuff. You know, Trigger is quite basic. She only increases 35%, which is the same value that Lycan increases, by the way. And then we also have, for example, Lighter. Lighter with his Mindscape 2 can increase your stun damage multiplier as well. And this is like a new multiplier. This is not related to damage, okay? Don't think it has any connection with damage. It has not. This is something else. That's exactly why Trigger, for example, she's so good. Because if you're using an on-field unit, you're getting a 1.35 multiplier to all your damage. You know, this is like 35% more damage for all of your on-field DPS unit. That's why Trigger is like super good if you're playing on-field unit. But when it comes to the stun multiplier, for the stun window itself, 35%, remember saturation, it's not that much anymore. So yeah, but what you need to keep in mind is that this is a new multiplier. It's not the same thing as damage. Let's go with another easy one, really easy one. Resistance. So let's say, for example, I'm playing Deadly Assault and I want to deal with Marionette. You're going to see it's weak to ice and ether. No resistances. Okay? No resistance. Weak to ice and ether. And usually, I say usually because there are some exceptions already, and Hoyo can always change this whenever they want. But usually, if the enemy is weak, this means you deal 30% increased damage to them. And if the enemy is resistant, you deal minus 20% damage to them. The only exception so far, if I recall correctly, I can't remember about Pompey, but the one I know for sure is that the Hugo doppelganger, you know, he is 40% resistant against ice. So this basically means that if you're using ice against Hugo, well, you're dealing a lot of less damage. Of course, you can also kind of change the resistance multiplier with some sources, such as Lighter. Lighter is like the classic one when it comes to fire and ice, because his core can reduce 15% of the enemy ice and fire resistance. Lycan is also another good example. Where's Lycan? Right here. Lycan reduces the enemy ice resistance by 25%. I don't know why here it says ice damage resistance, and Sokaku says, for example, on her Mindscape 4, that reduces the ice resistance. It's all ice damage resistance. Like, by default, yes, it also should affect days, and it also should affect build-up, okay? Enemy weakness and resistance affects both days and anomaly build-up. Just so you know, okay? This is an extra bonus tip for you. This here, it doesn't say ice damage resistance, but I tested this one on the training mode. It doesn't increase Sokaku ice build-up, okay? Nothing changes, it just damage. No idea why Lycan's the only one who gets ice damage resistance specified, but yeah, I left this one for the end, because you probably already know this one. And it's the defense multiplier. You probably know this one because my most watched video here on the channel is the penetration guide, which I made like months ago. So you probably understand how penetration works, but in case you don't know, I'm going to explain for you like in the most simple way as possible. It's a multiplier that is meant to reduce your damage. The defense multiplier is below 100%. It is meant to reduce your damage. All of the enemies on the end game, for example, all of these enemies right here on Deadly Assault, they have the exact same defense, okay? So this basically means that at level 60 unit, it is going to deal around 0.45 of their total damage to the enemy. It is scaled, as I said, with the enemy defense and your level. So if you're playing, you know, one of these challenge accounts where you only stay at level 50, this means that it's even lower than 0.45. So this is like the easiest way to explain for you. And how can you change the enemy defense? There's 4 different ways. We have the classic penetration percentage, the flat penetration. We have a defense reduction. I'm just going to write as defense red. And then we have the last one, which is defense ignore. These are the 4 ways you can mess up with the enemy defense. Penetration, I don't think I need to explain that much. We can find it on Puffer. You can find on Disc 5. Rena also helps you a little bit on this one. Flat penetration, which you can only find on Disc substats. So take a look on this one, for example. Here we go. Flat penetration, okay? It just appears as a substat. I don't think there's another source of flat penetration on the game. And then we have defense reduction, which is quite rare. You can find it that much, but for example, Nicole, where's Nicole? Nicole at core F can provide you with 40% reduced defense on the enemy. And then we have, for example, buffs such as Deadly Assault, which gives you even more defense reduction to the enemy. Yes, Nicole stacks with this buff right here and gives you a total of 55% reduced defense. Yes, that's how it works. Then we have defense ignore, which is also quite rare. You can't find it that much, but we have, for example, Miyabi at Mindscape 1. It ignores the enemy defense when using her charged attack. We have Evelyn at Mindscape 1, which also makes her ignore the enemy defense when dealing damage to enemies she is bound to. Jane at Mindscape 2, if I recall correctly, it ignores the enemy defense when dealing an assault to them, okay? And the list goes on. For example, we also have Hugo's signature that you can check right here. And Hugo's signature ignores 25%, I think, at phase 1. Yeah. The catch here, which is quite sad to be honest, is that defense reduction and defense ignore, they are super best friends, you know? You just sum them together and there you go. You have 50% defense reduction and 50% defense ignore. There you go. You have 100% defense reduction and you're completely ignoring the enemy defense. But, you know, penetration simply can't mix that well with defense reduction and defense ignore because it's multiplicative with these two. Okay, so let's say that we have 25% defense reduction, you have 25% defense ignore, then you have 50% penetration. Wow, cool stuff. You're probably thinking, okay, these two together, you get 50%. Oh my god, this looks like a 3. You have 50%. And then 50% plus 50%, it means 100%, right? No, it actually means 75%. Because this 50% penetration is only going to work on top of these remaining penetration. So you're reducing half of 50. And half of 50 means there's still 25% defense left on the enemy. And now you're probably thinking, okay, but what about the flat penetration? Where is it going to? Well, this is going at the end of all these things. So remember that I just said that the enemy still has 25% left. At the end of this, you simply add minus flat penetration. That's how the whole thing works. If you really want to understand like deep stuff, how defense multiplier works and other things, then I highly recommend checking my whole penetration guide, the one that I mentioned before, that I'm going to be linking in the top right corner. The main takeaways that you need to keep in mind is that 1, defense multiplier is meant to reduce your damage. 2, defense ignore and defense reduction, they love each other. Penetration, they don't mix that well. Okay, just keep this in mind. And the third one that I didn't explain right here, but basically, the more you stack your penetration, the higher your DPS gain. This is how the defense multiplier works. The huge problem, which as I explained on my penetration guide, is that you're usually sacrificing something else to get this extra penetration, which at the end of the day means it's not worth it. Oh, and if you're thinking about Xuan, because, well, they mentioned about the sheer force stuff, right? And sheer force pretty much means that this is out of the equation. Instead of having defense, sheer force simply ignores and goes away. That's how sheer force works, okay? They mentioned that sheer force is meant to ignore the enemy defense, so this means that this thing right here, it simply won't exist for sheer force. Okay, just keep this in mind. After this, there's still 2 multipliers, but you're not going to interact that much with them. The very first one is called damage taken. Thing about damage taken is that, once again, it has no relation to the damage multiplier. I know it sounds confusing, but it has no relation to the damage multiplier. There is no agent so far that can mess with this multiplier. But I am pretty sure that there are some enemies who can change how damage taken works. Okay, I'm not so sure. For example, we have Butcher right here. Attribute Anomaly is increased by 50%. You know, I can't say for sure if this is like damage taken or if this is like Attribute Anomaly damage. You know, it's so confusing, and that's why I keep asking for Hoyo to improve Training Room. Because if we get access to bosses like this and stuff like this on the training room, it makes so easier for us to test this stuff, to really deep test on some bosses. It will be really, really good. But you know, Hoyo likes hiding stuff from the player. So yeah, the last one that we actually have is something called distance. And this one is only going to apply for some specific units, you know, like actual ranged units such as Harumasa with the bow. We have Billy, we have Rina, we have Grace as well. This basically means that if you are a ranged unit, the farther you are from the enemy, the lower your damage. But if you're just using like a really huge area skill, such as Miyabi's ultimate, for example, you don't need to worry about it. You're not going to get like damage reduction just because you're using your ultimate and hitting the enemy at the end of your range. Okay, that's not how it works. So basically, you just need to remind yourself that you need to stay close to the enemy sometimes in order to achieve the maximum damage potential. I don't think you're going to, you know, play that far away from a boss enemy to deal damage. And then, after all this stuff happened, boom, there you go. Your damage pops up on your screen, or maybe not, because you decided to disable the numbers on your screen, which is actually quite sad. I don't know, I played the Maple Story for so long that I actually have a lot of fun with the damage numbers popping up on the screen, you know, but it's fine if you decided to disable the numbers. Pretty sure that you're going to have some questions about all this stuff, because I'm not that good explaining like complex stuff in easy way, but drop a comment down below with your question or join my Discord server. The link is down in the description, and I'll do my best to help you understand anything that is still like confusing for you. And yeah, that's pretty much everything that I need to cover. Oh, and if you're thinking about anomaly damage, I already have a guide on anomaly that I made like months ago. It's still like the same thing. It should pop up on your screen right now. I don't know. I need to time this one right. But yeah, go check it out if you want to understand anomaly as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.